Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. I hope you're having a great Sunday. I'm going to read something from True Spouse of Jesus Christ. It is for religious specifically, but you might find some good in it if you are not a religious. I do. I'm not a religious. All right. This is from chapter 22, 2. The means of acquiring divine love and the acts of love that a religious should practice towards Jesus Christ. The Lord commands all men to love him, and to love him with their whole hearts. But he wishes in a special manner that religious, his chosen spouses, should love him with all their affections. Hence, he has favored them with so many lights and spiritual graces that they may seek to love nothing but this most loving spouse. Saint Teresa used to say that God bestows a great favor on the souls he calls to his love. You, dear sisters, are one of these fortunate souls, but to consecrate yourself entirely to the love of your spouse, as he desires, you must resolutely adopt the means. 1. The first means is to desire ardently to attain that perfect love that will make your heart entirely belong to him. Ardent desires are the wings with which the saints flew to unite themselves to God by perfect love. If you have not this desire, at least ask it of God, for without it you will never be able to arrive at any degree of holiness. But with the aid of such desire, you will soon attain sanctity. Saint Teresa has left her spiritual children many excellent lessons on this subject. In one place she says, "Let our thoughts be great. From great thoughts our good shall come." In another place she writes, "We must not debase our desires, but must trust in God, for by continual efforts we shall, with the divine aid, gradually arrive at the perfection that the saints have attained." She attests that she had never seen a cowardly soul make as much progress in many years as a generous soul make in a few days. Hence, she said, the Lord is as much pleased with our desires as if they were already executed. St. Gregory says that he who pants after God with his whole heart finds him, but to wish for God with the whole heart, the soul must be stripped and emptied of worldly affections. 2. The second means necessary to love God with the whole heart is detachment from all love that is not for God. He wishes to have the exclusive possession of our whole hearts. He will admit no companion. St. Augustine relates that the Roman Senate, after adoring 30,000 gods, refused to adore God of the Christians, saying that he was a proud God who wished to be worshipped alone without companions. But this our Lord justly claims, for he is the only and the true God, and our only true lover, who, because he loves us tenderly, wishes that we should love him with our whole hearts. To love God with the whole heart implies two things. It implies first the expulsion from the heart of every affection that is not for God. The enamored St. Francis de Sales said, "If I knew that there was a single fiber in my heart that was not for God, I would instantly pluck it out." If the heart is not emptied of earthly affections, the love of God cannot enter. But in a heart detached from creatures, the fire of divine love burns and always increases. Saint Teresa used to say, "Detach the heart from creatures, seek God, and you shall find him. The Lord is good to the soul that seeketh him. He gives himself entirely to those that leave all things for his sake, as he once said to Saint Teresa, 'Now that you are all mine, I am all yours.' He says the same thing to you, if you divest yourself of all things in order to belong entirely to him." Father Cinieri, the younger, wrote to his spiritual soul, "Divine love is a thief that robs the soul of all her affections, so that she can say, 'What else do I wish for than thee alone, O my Lord?'" And St. Francis de Sales has said, "The pure love of God consumes all that is not God in order to convert everything into itself, for all that is done for the love of God is love." In the life of Venerable Caracciolo of the order of Theatines, we read that after the death of a brother, being in company with his relatives, he said, "Ah, let us reserve our tears for a better occasion, to weep over the death of Jesus Christ, who has been to us a father, a brother, and a spouse. and has died for the love of us. Every religious should reserve all her tenderness and compassion for Jesus, her spouse. Saint Joseph Calasantius used to say that she is a true religious who can say, "My God and my all." My God, thou art my all. Remember, dear sister, that when you were espoused to Jesus Christ, you said, "The kingdom of the world and all ornaments of the earth I have despised for the love of Jesus Christ, whom I have seen, whom I have loved, in whom I have believed, towards whom my heart inclined. I have renounced the world and all its pomp for the love of my spouse, whom I know to be the most amiable of all spouses, and therefore in him I have placed all my affections and all my hope. And when creatures seek to enter your heart, dismiss them, saying that you have given your heart to Jesus Christ, and that there is no room for them. It is divine love that makes a monastery the reverse of the world, in which all despise what the world esteems and love what the world hates. Above all, to love Jesus Christ with our whole heart, it is necessary to deny ourselves by embracing what is painful to self-love and by abstaining from what self-love seeks. Saint Teresa once refused to taste a dish that was brought to her in sickness. The infirmarian entreated her to eat it, saying that it was well dressed. The saint replied, "It is because it is well dressed that I do not wish to taste it." Hence we ought to abstain from things that are agreeable because they please us. We should therefore turn away the eyes and not look at certain objects of curiosity because they gratify the sight. We should also abstain from such an amusement because we feel a predilection for it. We should serve an ungrateful sister because she is ungrateful. We should take such a medicine because it is bitter. Beware, says St. Francis de Sales, lest self-love should seek to have part in things the most holy, and should make it appear to us that nothing is good in which we do not feel satisfaction. Hence the saint used to say that even virtues should be loved with detachment. For example, we ought to love mental prayer and solitude. But when obedience or charity takes us away from meditation or solitude, we must not be disturbed, but must embrace with peace whatever happens by the will of God, however repugnant it may be to our own inclinations. The Venerable Father Balthazar Alvarez used to say that our Lord often commands creatures to turn their back upon us and abandon us, that we may run to him. But let us be careful to leave them and unite ourselves to God before they forsake us. The path of the just as a shining light goeth forwards, and increaseth even to perfect day. The wise man says that the life of the just always increases to perfect day. But who arrives at that perfect day? He that without inclining to anything until he knows the divine will wishes, or wishes not, what God wills or wills not. Hence we should pray in the words of the same Father Alvarez, Lord, grant me the grace to find peace in whatever thy divine will shall appoint for me. For my part, I ask neither more delights nor fewer affections. Oh, how happy the life of the nun that lives detached from all things! Let us be persuaded that there is no one more content in this world than the man who despises all its goods and wishes only for God. Hence each of us should live on this earth as in a wilderness, saying, "Here there is no one but myself and God." And with this spirit of detachment, endeavor, dear sister, in the Lord, to renew every day the religious vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, intending to divest yourself of all attachment to property, to pleasure, to self-will. Make this renewal of vows in a few words, that you make them more easily and more frequently. It is enough for you to say, "My Jesus, for the love of thee, I renew my vows, and purpose to observe them with exactness. I entreat thee to grant me the grace to be faithful to thee." 3. The third means of obtaining the perfect love of Jesus Christ is to meditate frequently on his passion. Saint Mary Magdalene de Pazzi used to say that after being made the spouse of a crucified God, a religious during her life and in all her actions, should have nothing before her view but Jesus on the cross, and should have no other occupation than the contemplation of the love that this divine spouse has borne her. Were a person to suffer for a friend insults, stripes, and imprisonment, how great the pleasure he would derive from hearing that his friend frequently remembered his sufferings. But if, when his sufferings are mentioned, the friend should endeavor to change the subject of conversation, and should refuse even to think of them, how great the pain that he would feel at such ingratitude! Such the pain given to the heart of Jesus by the souls that think but little on the sorrows and ignominies that he suffered for the love of them. But on the other hand, he is greatly pleased with all those that continually remember and meditate on his passion. I say that the only object of all the meditations of a religious ought to be on the passion of Jesus Christ. She should make at least one meditation on it every day. As a side note, I have heard St. Teresa of Avila say that there are certain souls who tend to be sort of depressive, and if the passion makes them depressive, they need to meditate on something else. To me, it appears, as I have observed in another place, that it was to supply different mysteries for the meditations of his beloved spouses that our Redeemer wished to suffer different species of pains and reproaches, chains, buffets, scourges, thorns, spittle, and nails. It was for this end that he wished to represent himself to us suffering in so many different ways, at one time sweating blood in the garden, at another bound and captured by the soldiers, now clothed with a white garment and badge of a fool, again torn with scourges, now crowned with thorns as a king of sorrows and mockery, and again going to death with the cross on his shoulders, at one time suspended by nails on a cross, and at another hanging dead on that bed of sorrow, with his side opened. But remember that we should not meditate on the passion of Jesus Christ in order to enjoy spiritual consolations, but for the sole purpose of inflaming our souls with the love of our Redeemer, and of learning from him what he wishes us to do, offering ourselves to suffer every pain for his sake, because he voluntarily suffered so much for the love of us. Our Lord once revealed to a holy solitary that there is no exercise more apt to kindle in us the divine love than the meditation on his passion. The fourth means to attain perfect love is to make frequent acts of love. As fire is kept alive by fuel, so love is nourished by acts. He that loves in the first place rejoices at the welfare and happiness of his beloved. This is called love of complacency. Rejoice then, dear sisters, in infinite felicity of your God, and delight in it more than if it were your own. For you should love your spouse more than yourself, and your greatest joy should consist in the thought that your beloved wants nothing, and will not for all eternity want anything necessary for infinite beatitude. Hence you ought to feel consolation in knowing that so many millions of angels and saints love him perfectly in heaven. You should also rejoice whenever you hear that any soul on earth loves Jesus Christ with a tender love. He that loves desires to see his beloved loved by all. Such love is called the love of benevolence, which you should practice by desiring to see Jesus Christ ardently loved by all men. And as a side note, we have so many people today that say, it doesn't matter what religion you follow, everybody's going to go to heaven in a little green boat. Obviously here, St. Alphonsus Liguori is not saying that. Hence you should do well to speak frequently to others of his love in order to kindle it in the hearts of all those with whom you converse. You should, moreover, desire to see your spouse known and loved by all that neither know nor love him, and to you the contempt with which he is treated by so many Christians should be the only source of pain. Would she be considered an affectionate spouse who should behold with indifference an insult offered to her husband, or a wound inflicted on him? You should grieve still for the offenses that you remember to have hitherto given your spouse. For these you should constantly make acts of contrition. This is called sorrowful love. He that loves prefers his beloved to all other objects, and this is the love of preference with which God principally wishes us to love him. The first degree of this love consists in being prepared to lose all things rather than forfeit the grace of God. Does the Lord demand too much of us when he requires that we prefer him to everything in this world? And what are creatures compared with God? The Emperor Domitian tempted Saint Clement to worship idols by presenting to him, as the reward of his impiety, a gold, silver, and precious stone. The saint heaved a deep sigh and began to weep when he saw his God compared with earthly goods. We should be ashamed to say to God, Lord, I love thee above all things. For to speak in this manner to God would be the same as if we should say to a king, My sovereign, I esteem you more than that chaff and mire. But our God is content with being loved above all creatures, which, compared with his sovereign majesty, are infinitely less than chaff or mire, is in comparison with the first monarch of the universe. Father Vincent Carafa of the Society of Jesus used to say that were the whole world in his possession, he would surrender it in an instant at the bare name of God. It is necessary, then, to live always in such a disposition of mind that we would forfeit property, character, life, and all things sooner than lose God. We must say with St. Paul, neither death nor life, nor height nor depth, shall be able to separate us from our God. He that feels he cannot live without God possesses a great treasure, but he that aspires to his perfect love should not only be ready to die 1,000 times rather than offend him by mortal sin, or even by a deliberate venial sin, but should also prefer the pleasure of God before all self-indulgence, and should be prepared to suffer every pain in order to please his Lord. Consider, O sister, that Jesus Christ has preferred your salvation before his own life. In you, then, it is not much, nay, it is nothing, to prefer his pleasure to every personal good. They that love refuse not, on the contrary, they rejoice to suffer for their beloved, in order to give him proof of their love. It was thus that Jesus Christ has shown his love for us. He that desires to suffer for Jesus desires, or at least embraces in peace, the occasions of suffering. For loving souls, tribulations, as it were, are the way to union with God, for in sufferings they unite themselves with him by stronger love. Father Balthazar Alvarez used to say that he who in affections peacefully resigns himself to the divine will runs to God. In a word, every event, whether it causes joy or sorrow, tends to unite the soul that loves more closely to her God. To them that love God, all things work together unto good. It is certain that all his arrangements are intended for our good. Our Lord said one day to St. Gertrude, With the same love with which I created man, I ordained for his good all the prosperity or adversity which I send him. Be particularly careful, dear sister, to unite yourself to God in the time of sickness. Infirmities prove the true lover. In sickness you must be obedient to the physician and to the infirmarian. Ask for nothing, and take the remedies prescribed, however nauseous and painful. Do not complain of anything. Be meek and thankful to all. Resign yourself entirely to the will of God, and offer yourself to suffer whatsoever he sends, uniting yourself to Jesus on the cross, desiring not to descend from it so long as it is not his will, content even to leave your life upon it, if such be his will. Fix your eyes on the crucifix, and when you see that your sufferings are far less than those Jesus suffered for your sake, you will bear the pains of sickness with greater peace. Love your spouse, says St. Francis de Sales, in consolations and tribulations. He is as lovely when he consoles as when he afflicts you, because he does all for your welfare. If you love Jesus Christ, love contempt, love correction, and entreat the confessor and superior to correct and chastise you in the way that they deem most profitable to you. The same St. Francis de Sales used to say that the monastery is like a hospital to which the sick come to be cured, and in which they cheerfully submit to the nauseous medicines and painful operations that may be prescribed. Hence, you should ask your spiritual physician not to exempt you from any remedy necessary for your recovery. He that loves always remembers his beloved. Thus, the soul that loves God always thinks of him, and always endeavors to show him its affection by ardent sighs and ejaculations of love. This is called the love of aspiration. Endeavor frequently by day and night, in the cell and out of the cell, in solitude and in company, to say frequently to your crucified spouse, My God, I wish for nothing but thee. My God, I give myself entirely to thee. I wish whatsoever thou wishest. Dispose of me as thou pleasest. It will be enough to say to him, My God, I love thee, or My God, my all. A loving sigh, an elevation of the heart, a look towards heaven, an affectionate glance at the crucifix or at the most holy sacrament will be sufficient, even without words. Such acts are perhaps the most useful because they can be made more easily and more frequently, and sometimes they are the most fervent. As a side note, I remember recently I was listening to Fulton Sheen, and he said that he had a chapel in his house with the Blessed Sacrament. Wouldn't that be so cool if we had that? But anyway, he had that privilege because he was a priest and a bishop. And every time he would pass by the Blessed Sacrament, which was very frequent in his house, he would just say hello or I love you or help this person. And that's basically what St. Alphonsus Liguori is talking about. Or St. Therese when she says, a prayer for me is just a glance to heaven. Or I might not have that correct, but you get the idea of what I'm saying. In the old law, the Lord commanded that fire should burn unceasingly on his altar, and the fire on the altar shall always burn. I wonder if that's why when you go into a Catholic church and we believe that the host is really our Lord himself, that's why they have the fire burning, the red light that shows that Jesus is there. St. Gregory says that these altars are our hearts, on which God commands that the fire of his divine love should always burn. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart. These words which I command thee this day shall be in my heart, and thou shalt meditate upon them, sitting in thy house, walking on thy journey, sleeping and rising. And thou shalt bind them as a sign on thy hand, and they shall be, and shall move before thy eyes. And thou shalt write them in the entry and on the doors of thy house. Mark the earnestness with which the Lord inculcates the precept of loving him. I wish, he says, that this command be always within your heart, that your meditation upon it continually sitting in your house, walking on your journey, in bed and out of bed. I wish that you keep it printed on your hands and present to your eyes. I wish that you write it on the entrance and on all the doors of your house, in order to remember it always and fulfill it by acts of love. Hence theologians justly teach that though it be probable that we are not bound to make acts of faith and hope more than once a year, still we are obliged to make an act of charity at least once a month. Some say that we ought to make it more frequently. Father Balthazar Alvarez used to call monasteries of religious hospitals of persons wounded with divine love, furnaces of love, in which the hardest rocks are reduced to ashes. Such they ought to be. All men should burn continually with the love of Jesus Christ. But alas, few, very few, have this ardent love. I say that if Jesus Christ could weep at present and were capable of sadness, his greatest sorrow would arise from seeing himself so little loved by his spouses. Do you then, dear sister, who have been made his spouse, love him at least through compassion, at the sight of your God who is so little loved, and particularly by religious? Tell me where a mighty prince of noble birth, of immense wealth, of extraordinary beauty and holiness to take for his spouse a poor, ignorant, deformed, ill-dressed peasant, and were he, by making her his spouse, to render her rich, noble, wise, and happy, what would she not do for such a spouse? How great the affection and respect that she would feel for him at the sight of his greatness and her own vileness. She would do nothing else than thank him continually for his goodness towards her. With what care would she labor to gratify his inclinations and to please him in all things? How careful would she be to execute without reply all his wishes, and should it be necessary to suffer any pain for his sake, with what promptness and joy would she submit to it? How happy would she esteem herself in giving him such proof of her affection and gratitude? And should she see him despised by his subjects, would she not weep continually? Were she even through her own negligence to offend him, how great would be her sorrow, and with what humility would she cast herself in tears at his feet and ask pardon? Should she be at a distance from her spouse? Oh, would she not count the hours and moments of her absence from him? How great the happiness that she would feel in making of her former and present state. Apply what has been said to yourself, dear sister. Jesus Christ has made you a miserable sinner, his own spouse. Love then your spouse. But know that unless you love him with your whole heart, he will not be satisfied. Love him not only with affections of the heart, but love him also by works. Some that are friends only in name say to their friends, Friend, you are master of all that I possess, but in effect they give him little or nothing. But others that are real friends give to their friend the better part of their possessions and offer him the rest. A religious soul that resolves to give herself to God without reserve divests herself of all earthly things to which she sees her heart attached. She resolves to subject all her inclinations to holy obedience. She resolves to mortify herself in all that gratifies self-love, to disregard self-esteem, and to embrace with joy derision and contempt. Oh, with what security does such a resolution make her walk? What confidence in God does it inspire? How prompt does it render the soul to bear crosses and contradictions? It makes her perform all her actions with a pure intention. It impels her to pray to Jesus and Mary for help to execute her purposes, and makes her firm and resolute in seeking in all things only what is pleasing to God. When difficulties occur, the same resolution animates her to say with courage, I have to please God. Let pleasure be given to him, though death should be the consequence. Should she sometimes fall into a defect, the resolution she has made prevents dejection, inspires hope, and gives her courage to attend with greater care for the future to what she had before neglected. But this resolution must be frequently renewed in meditation, at communion, in the visits to the Blessed Sacrament, and at rising in the morning. It is particularly necessary to make the following protestation. My Jesus, I again give myself to thee, and I promise to endeavor to do always what I shall know to be the most pleasing to thee. I unite this oblation of mine to the perfect unreserved oblation of thyself, which thou hadst made to thy eternal Father. Give me strength to be faithful to thee. Thy passion is my hope, thy merit, thy promises, thy love are my hope. O Mary, my mother, pray to Jesus for me. Obtain for me holy perseverance and the love of thy Son. If, dear sister, you wish to acquire the great treasure of the love of God, I recommend you to ask it continually, saying, My Jesus, give me love. Mary, obtain for me the gift of divine love. My holy angel guardian, my holy advocates, obtain for me the gift of love. It will be sufficient to say love. God will be always pleased with it and will always infuse some new sentiment of devotion, will kindle some new flame, will excite some holy desire in your heart. Our Lord is liberal in dispensing all his gifts, but particularly in granting the gift of love to those that ask it. For this love is what he demands of us above all things. But let us ask not so much for a tender as for a strong love, that will make us conquer all human respect, all repugnance of self love, and render us prompt in doing without delay or reserve the things that are pleasing to God. And let us therefore accustom ourselves to seek what is most pleasing to God in all, even in small things, for we shall thus be prepared to do great things. And when you are bothered with the apprehension of not having strength to overcome yourself in some extraordinary difficulty, trust in God and say, I can do all things in him who strengthens me. Say what I am of myself unable to do, I shall be able to do with the aid that I expect from God. St. Augustine says that all the time that is not spent for God is lost time. At death, we shall receive consolation only from having loved Jesus Christ. O God, how great the consolation that they who have loved him shall enjoy in being able to say with their eyes fixed on the crucifix, Jesus crucified has been my only love. Even in this life, what greater happiness can a soul enjoy than to say, I give pleasure to God. I am in the company of God. But we must give ourselves to God, not for our own gratification, but to please him, altogether grateful of ourselves, saying with the spouses in the canticle, he brought me into the cellar of wine. He set in order charity in me. Stay me up with flowers, compass me about with apples, because I languished with love. By wine is signified holy charity. For as wine deprives men of their senses, so that they no longer see or hear, but are as it were dead, so the soul inflamed with divine love lives as if it no longer had any sense of earthly things, and forgetful of created objects, wishes for nothing but God. And therefore it asks the flowers of holy desires and the fruits of holy works, which support the spiritual life that is divine love, and which and for which it lives. But this can be said only by the soul that truly gives itself entirely and without reserve to Jesus Christ. What do you say, dear sister? Have you as yet given yourself to him as he desires you to do? Do you still resist? Has he not done enough to merit all your love? Jesus Christ gives himself to you without reserve, once on the cross and frequently in Holy Communion. What more do you expect from him? What more can you do in order to make you belong entirely to himself? Will you wait till he abandons you and calls you no more? In punishment of your ingratitude, arise then, instantly, resist no longer. Say to him. And then he says a prayer, and there are a few parts I'll read. Whom will I love when I see that a God has died for me? And grant that I may speak of nothing but thy love, sigh for nothing else than to love thee and to give thee pleasure. My Jesus, I hope for all things through thy merits. And that's all I will read of True Spouse of Jesus Christ at the end of the chapter. But I'll leave you with this thought. When a man and woman get married, there is a sacrament of marriage because the husband represents Jesus and the wife represents the church. And the husband is supposed to be, as Jesus did, love and die for his spouse or sacrifice himself. And the wife, as the sign of the church, is supposed to obey and love her spouse. And some people have a lot of issues with the traditional idea of marriage and the sacrament that our Lord instituted to represent. It's not about you, people. It's about Jesus and the love he had for his spouse. So that's what marriage is. A sacrament is an external sign which represents something that's going on spiritually. And when a sister becomes the spouse of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church, there's no sacrament associated with a woman becoming a nun or a sister, because she is already living on earth what we hope to live in heaven, which is union with God by being his spouse. So just to leave you with that thought. And so to not look as the religious life as something less because there is no sacrament involved. It's a beautiful thing to look into the sacraments and see what they all represent. It's beautiful. And to see these sisters who are living in life already what we will eventually live in heaven. But thanks for listening. I'm not sure I'll be reading much more of True Spouse of Jesus Christ, but get yourself a copy if you're interested. It's really beautiful and probably my favorite book. And meet me back here next time for another reading for Sunday, something religious. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.